Good morning, Abundant Life Church. This is Pastor Chris, and today we're going to be looking at Romans chapter 13, verses 1 down through 7. When I had a big birthday, I turned 50, and when this happened, my wife had to get together with all of our friends, and I was opening presents, and one of the presents I got was Deb just wrapped up a little note that said, "You're going to a Raiders game." I've never been to a professional football game, been to lots of college games, never an NFL game. And she knows how much I love my Raiders. So she said, "We're going to send you to Oakland." They were in Oakland at the time. "We're going to send you to Oakland. You're going to go to a game." And she also said, "I'm not going with you." She wasn't going to put herself through that. She said, "I'm going to get you 2 tickets." So one of my best friends, Brock, was there at this get together, and I just turned to him and said, "Brock, you and me." Now, just so you know, we never actually went. I finally told Debbie, I said, "They're terrible. And as bad as they are, they're going to lose all their games, and we're going to spend all this money for nothing. I'd much rather watch them lose on TV for free." But anyways, at the time, planning to go to a game. And my friend Brock is from Ohio, huge Cleveland Browns fan, and they were playing the Browns that year. And so I said to Brock, "You're coming with me? We'll go to the Browns game. But there's one condition." He said, "What's that?" I said, "You have to wear a Cleveland Browns jersey." His his wife came to me a little bit later in the party and said, "Were you kidding about that? Or were you serious?" I said, "Of course I was kidding. They'll kill him there." Here's the thing. Like I said, we didn't end up going, but the Raiders did play the Browns, and the Browns won. I'm so glad we didn't go. But my point I want to make is this. I could tell Brock was a little scared about walking into a Raiders game wearing a Browns jersey, as well he should be. We're going to talk about things that are frightening, and particularly things that frighten, well, everybody in general, but especially pastors. I'm talking about politics. I'm talking about giving a political opinion or even bringing the issue of politics or government up, which is what Paul does in this passage today. He talks about obeying the government. Okay, this is not a subject, well, I shouldn't say that preachers like to talk about, because way too many of them do like to talk about it. They shouldn't like to talk about it. It should only be brought up when scripture brings it up. And I got to tell you, I feel right now like I'm wearing a Cleveland Browns jersey walking into a Raider game. When somebody tells you that guy's not afraid to preach the truth, you know what that means? What that means is he takes my side on things. The real test is that preacher afraid to preach on a subject that you might disagree on and you might want to argue about? I'm going to say some things in these next three videos that you're probably going to disagree with. And some of you are probably quite passionate about it, because we spend, as a people, a lot of time debating politics, debating government, getting very passionate about these things. And Paul does bring that topic up. There's nothing that's more likely to stir up debate and controversy, not just among Christians, but among anybody other than politics. But remember, this is not some relative spouting off about politics at Thanksgiving dinner. This is an apostle. This is Paul saying these things. So what he says about politics and government is going to carry some pretty serious weight. So what did he say? In a nutshell, Paul said we're supposed to obey the government. But did he mean we're supposed to obey even a bad government? Do you obey a government only when you agree with it, or do you obey it without question, even though you know it's wrong or it's evil? What if they pass laws that you don't agree with? What does Paul say about this? Well, that's what we're going to dive into here. Uh, Paul starts out basically by saying that as Christians, we have to realize governments are something from God. They're, they're what God gave so that there wouldn't be chaos and upheaval. So When we obey the government, we are actually obeying God. When we disobey the government, fill in the rest. Look at verses 1 through 5. But hang on, an ad just popped up. You ever notice when you're reading your actual Bible, an actual book, ads don't pop up? Anyways, verses 1 through 5. Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. For no ruler hold terror for those who do right, but for those who do wrong. Do you want to be free from fear of the one in authority? Then do what is right, and you will be commended. For the one in authority is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid. For rulers do not bear the sword for no reason. They are God's servant, agents of wrath to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. Therefore, it is necessary to submit to the authorities, not only because of possible punishment, but also as a matter of conscience. Governments are from God. But haven't there been evil governments? I mean, what about Nazi Germany? What about the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia? Those are pretty evil governments. Paul can't possibly be saying that every government and every leader is good. Was he saying that we have to obey even bad governments rather than trying to change them? As Christians, shouldn't we be trying to change the things in government that are wrong? But Paul did nothing to eradicate the things that were wrong in the government that he was under. Remember, Paul was under the rule of the Roman Empire. Let me give you one example of this. Paul did nothing to try to eradicate slavery in the Roman government. In fact, he told slaves to obey their masters. Apparently, Jesus was pretty apolitical too. He did nothing to live up to those expectations people had that he would drive out the Roman government. Why didn't they take on these evil institutions? Why obey bad government? And again, this was the Roman Empire we're talking about. This was the government that put Paul to death. This was the government that put Jesus to death. Even the way they collected their taxes was an affront to God. Look at verses 6 through 7. This is also why you pay taxes. For the authorities are God's servants who give their full time to governing. Give to everyone what you owe them. If you owe taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, then revenue. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor. Taxes were collected in Roman coinage, which had an image of Caesar on them. And remember, Caesar was considered to be a god. So the Jews were saying, but taxes then, paying taxes with Roman coinage, is using a false god, a graven image. And we can't do that. This was the question that the Pharisees brought to Jesus when they said, should we pay taxes to Caesar or not? Because it's got his picture, a graven image on it. How could a godly person be expected to go along with this? And there's Paul saying, pay your taxes. But it's idolatry. Pay your taxes. Again, this was the Roman government Paul is talking about. This was the government of Nero, the great persecution. This was the government of Caligula, and with the rampant immorality. This was the government, again, that put Jesus to death, that put Paul to death, that persecuted the church, that put many believers to death and in prison. Why then did he tell them to blindly obey something so wrong and so desperately in need of change? One of the great Christian minds of the 20th century was Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He was a pastor in Germany, and Bonhoeffer was involved with other pastors in a plot to assassinate Adolf Hitler. They had seen everything that was going on. They had seen all the atrocities. They had seen that he had thrown the country into war and was persecuting Jews and gypsies, and they plotted to assassinate him. The plot was discovered, and Bonhoeffer and these other pastors were hung. Were they right to engage in a plot to overthrow the government? We debate about that in graduate school. My answer is, I'm not sure. I don't know. How do we make sense of all this? Well, I think a good way would be to tune in next time and we'll talk about it then. Till then, have a great day.